academic freedom. This matter is very important, very controversial to the academe, especially with so many government restrictions. What is academic freedom? It's a right guaranteed by the Constitution. In the 1987 Constitution, it says that academic freedom shall be enjoyed in all institutions of higher learning. You compare that with the provisions of the previous constitutions saying that all institutions of higher learning shall enjoy academic freedom, and with 35 Constitution saying that universities established by the state shall enjoy academic freedom. So if you look at the provisions of the three constitutions on academic freedom, the newer constitutions are more inclusive, expanding than the first constitution. In the first constitution, in the 35 Constitution, it's enjoyed by state universities. In the 73 Constitution, it says that institutions of higher learning shall enjoy academic freedom. So it's the institution itself. But for the 87 Constitution, you look at the provision, it says that in all institutions of higher learning, it's more inclusive because it would seem to say that academic freedom is not only enjoyed by the institution itself, but now it's also shared with faculty. And some would argue, to an extent, to the students who are part of that marketplace of ideas. So, is academic freedom exclusive to institutions of higher learning only? Because if you look at the provision, it clearly says institutions, academic institutions of higher learning, diba? Institutions of higher learning. However, note that in the trifocal, it's not only the institution of higher learning, the higher educational institutions, the college, graduate school, the law school, for example, enjoy leeway of freedom. Because while primarily it belongs to the higher education level, remember that in Article 14, Section 4, it says that the state recognizes the complementary roles of the public and the private institutions in the educational system and shall exercise reasonable supervision and regulation of all educational institutions. So it says that as partners of education, private schools are given only reasonable or subject only to reasonable supervision and regulation, not control. Remember that there is a distinction between the concept of control and of supervision. Supervision only sees that you only oversee that the laws are complied with, while control has the power of supplanting, replacing a discretion, an exercise of a decision, or an implementation of a prerogative. But in supervision, there is none. It's only oversight. So it would seem to suggest that while all institutions are only subject of reasonable supervision, they are not subject of control. So these are terminologies which are legal, no? It's a jurisprudential basis. But honestly, education in the basic level are subject to more control than the higher educational institutions because apparently there is more state interest and social interest for the honing of young minds. So, in the matter of academic freedom, jurisprudence says that this institutional academic freedom includes the right of the school or college to decide for itself its aims and objectives, how to best attain them, free from outside control and coercion or interference, say possibly when the overwhelming public welfare calls for some restraint. Indeed, the Constitution allows merely the state's regulation and supervision of educational institutions and not the deprivation of its rights. This goes for all the levels of education. For higher education, it's more emphatic, it's more emphasized that you really have academic freedom in all institutions of higher learning. Read this together with the concept of the right of the citizen to select a profession or course of study subject to fair, reasonable, and equitable admission and academic requirements. Napakahabang usapin nito, itong academic freedom. In fact, it would consume more than a day of discussion, but let's try to simplify this for the higher educational institutions. No? So what is the scope of academic freedom? First, it is given to schools. Schools have the right to include in its discretion who may teach, what may be taught, how it shall teach, and who may be admitted to study. Who may teach is a right of the school when it determines who can be employed as faculty members. It can require for higher than state requirements of qualifications for college teachers. It may require not only the minimum, for example, of the master's degree for the college, but it may require, private schools, for example, may require industry experience or teaching experience or higher aptitude or proficiency. Who may be taught, this refers to the admission of students who that the school allows to study with it. No, enrollment is different from admission. When you are admitted, you're accepted to study with the school. Enrollment is the act of subscribing, paying the tuition fees, selecting your subjects, your courses. So, who may be admitted to study. What may be taught, this determines the content of the programs. Although the CHED has its policies, standards, and guidelines for the course content, the school have the leeway to determine what is the content of the entire curriculum, no, or its specific subjects based on its mission and vision. It can even determine that mission and vision for itself, and that also includes that freedom on what may be taught also includes discipline, because discipline is part of educating the minds of your students. No, how it shall teach is the prerogative of the school to determine the method and manner of teaching. For example, if the school wants to teach students on the blended modality, partly online, partly face-to-face, then it could be done, no, subject to state regulations, of course. It could also, well, dapat nga hindi subject to state regulation. But what's happening is the CHED is regulating the delivery of education, no? The use of technology. And that has been the bone of contention in so many years until came the COVID-19 pandemic. No? So that's how it shall teach. No? That's why it's acceptable that classroom observations are made and recommendations are given for the improvement of the teaching of the instructors. So cases who may teach, you have the case of AMA Computer College, Mercado versus AMA Computer College, where the Supreme Court said that the academic freedom grants the school the autonomy to decide for itself the terms and conditions for hiring of teachers, subject, of course, to the overarching limitations under the labor code. Sorry. So actually for college teachers, you can be made regular only after 3 years of teaching. However, what happens is the school may require for more training, but it should not violate the labor code on the requirement of regularization after the period of probation. What to teach? This case of the LSU versus Court of Appeals on the disciplinary action against students, it highlights that schools may discipline students, and that discipline of students is part of honing them into the ideals of honing into them the ideals of the school through discipline. This may include, therefore, not only discipline but also the direction of the school, which is manifested in their curriculum, in the subjects that are taught in each curriculum, the mission and vision. Who may be admitted to study, the famous case of Garcia versus the Faculty Admission Committee of the Loyola School of Theology, where the schools have the right to determine who can be admitted to study. Like, you cannot force a student, or a student cannot force himself to study in a school exclusively for the religious men, no? You read this case of Garcia versus Faculty Admissions Committee, where the Supreme Court also said that it's not ready to assume the role of the admissions office of each school, that the discretion to determine who should be admitted to such schools are left to the schools themselves. In the case of Villar versus TIP, this is on the matter of continued enrollment or admission. Education law would dictate that once a school admits a student, the student has the right to finish his education in that school from day one until the day that he is given his degree. But this is subject to certain limitations. For example, the closure of the school, grades. If the student fails to reach the minimum grades or set a standard by the school, the quality point index, or disciplinary actions which could result not only to suspension, community service, but also dismissal and expulsion. Between dismissal and expulsion, more severe is expulsion, because while dismissal, only this allows you to join the school or come back to the school. Expulsion prohibits you from enrolling also elsewhere. So this case of Villar versus Technological Institute of the Philippines cites an example of where a student may be restricted from his continued admission in a school because of grade deficiencies. For faculty members, the jurisprudence is absent, but we have or lacking, but we have this international standard for academic freedom of teachers, primarily for research. The full freedom to research and in the publication of the results subject to the adequate performance of their academic duties. So do research, the school will not interfere, but perform your academic duties as well. Freedom in the classroom to discuss their subjects, but they should be careful not to introduce into their teaching controversial matters which have no relation to their subjects. Tsaka when the faculty members speak or write in their capacity as citizens, they are free from institutional censorship or discipline for as long as you do not carry the name of your school. Generally, if you want to carry the name of your school, you have to ask permission to represent your school. So we have this case of NLRC versus Salgarino. Academic freedom of faculty members refer to the freedom of teachers from control of thought or utterance of his academic research, findings, and conclusions, and has nothing to do with the discretion of teachers to pass or fail any of their students according to their discretion. Meaning, whilst teachers may fail students or give them a passing grade, this must be based on the approved grading system and based on the standards set by the school. But the assessment of the teachers, of the students, are of course respected. They are of course respected. For students, the old notion is that students do not have academic freedom because students do not teach. However, students have a vast array of rights in the Bill of Rights, as the right to due process, the right to redress of grievances, privacy, press freedom, diba? Expression, right against inhuman punishments, freedom of religion or faith. They have the vast array of freedoms. But there is a growing opinion, however, that students should be given academic freedom because the university is an avenue where students and teachers collaborate for research, and not only research, discourse, and dialogue. It is awkward that teachers, for their part, have academic freedom, but students have none. Because academic freedom, when they dialogue, they do discourse or do research, they are also in a way indirectly educating their fellow students and not only learning from the experience. Part of academic freedom is the right of every citizen to select a profession or course of study subject to fair, reasonable, and equitable admission and academic requirements. According to Section 5, pumili ng iyong napipiling course or specialization. But remember this case of Vex versus San Diego, where the student wanted to join the medical school but was prohibited from doing so because of his continuous failing of the national admission test for medical students. The Supreme Court said, while his intentions may be noble, he has the ambition, his dreams unquestionable. But you cannot force circular pegs into square holes. We all fit somewhere. While his persistence is noteworthy, to say the least, it is certainly misplaced, like a hopeless love. Because the right to quality education is not absolute. The Constitution provides every citizen has the right to choose a profession or course of study subject to fair, reasonable, and equitable admission and academic requirements. Failing to qualify means you can be excluded from the study. Okay, but you definitely you belong somewhere else. Students and academic freedom must also consider the accessibility of education. Because what is that academic freedom if the student has no access to education itself? Constitution says the state shall protect and promote the right of all citizens to quality education on all levels and shall make appropriate steps to make such education accessible. How accessible is accessible? Accessible in the sense that school should be streamlined for persons with disabilities, for example. That's accessibility of education. But the most common question on accessibility for schools is accessibility because of affordability. For the basic education, there's no problem because the state maintains a system of free public education from elementary to high school. This is in response also to international law, which requires elementary and the fundamental stages free education, and that education should be compulsory for such children and such stages. But for our Constitution, it's not only free for the elementary level, but also for the high school level. What about for the higher education? It is not statutory, but the free education for those in the higher level is guaranteed by statute. RA 10931, the Universal Access to Quality Tertiary Education Act, approved last 2017. This gave rise to the enrollment for state universities where students who are qualified can be given access to quality state education, paid education in the colleges. Accessibility also would refer to technological accessibility. During the pandemic, we were too reliant on the internet, but many experienced digital poverty. The digital poverty was so prevalent that many were deprived of a year or two of schooling because of lack of access to the internet, because they cannot either afford one or there is that lack of signal in their provinces, which is actually a right. Because according to the Constitution, in what we call the Braid provision, which was authored by Commissioner Florangel Braid of the Constitutional Commission that drafted the 87 Constitution, the state shall, in Section 10 of Article 16, the state shall provide the policy environment for the full development of Filipino capability and the emergence of communication structures suitable to the needs and aspirations of the nation and the balanced flow of information into, out of, and across the country. So that's it. That's the constitutional basis if you're asking for a legal basis for a good internet connection. Limitations of academic freedom would be the police power of the state. In the case of San Diego, where public welfare requires the regulation of certain professions. Like the practice of law is limited only for those who have passed the bar. Before you can pass the bar, you should qualify for the law school, no? And the standards are set as high. Social interest, because education is a national and social interest. While you have the academic freedom, the state is stuck stakeholder of education. That's why in the delivery of quality of education, the quality of education, in the accessibility of education, the manner of delivering education, and all the elements of the business of education. That's it, no? The state has interest, but for many schools, it's not a business. It's a vocation. It's a mission. So thank you. I hope you have learned something from this video. Thank you for watching.